Episode 24 of the Crownsmen Podcast is here and now. I'm your host, Jared Downey. My co-host is Gowdy Molina.
Yes, hello and good morning.
Good morning. Gowdy, this is a bit of a special day for us, and
It is.
hopefully our audience too. What is today? Why have you put so many
All the balloons.
Did I have a
and-
baby that I don't know about?
I'm not sure actually. But no, this is our 1 year anniversary. Well, I guess not ours. It's the Crownsmen Podcast.
Podcast,
So
yeah.
it's us and our viewers as well, or listeners, because they're part of it too.
Yeah, and all of our guests for the first
That's
people
right.
that joined us, and it's been 1 year, so it's pretty crazy because when it seems we started at CIM Vancouver.
That's right.
Actually, technically, we went to Quesnel, the Quesnel Gold
We
Show,
did, yeah. So technically we're a little over a year now.
before we really launched and started
Yeah, but
pushing
I
the show.
think we launched. I
We'll-
think
we'll
we,
call that
we
our
were.
test.
Yeah, we did a few tests, and I'm glad we did. We fully launched it at CIM.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because what happened? We went to the Quesnel Gold Show, and it was so nice. They invited us up there. They gave us a spot, and
fantastic.
it was so fun. But we were new, and so we got the equipment that was good for being in a studio like we are
Yeah.
now. But we were in this. They put the show on because it was a placer mining show, and they put us. It was this big barn.
Yeah, it was quite the show. To
It was
be honest.
yeah. They pulled the placer equipment in there and
Yeah.
everything, and it was great. They had like a gold panning thing,
Yeah.
but it was so echoey in the barn.
It was because it was a trade show and it was quite loud.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, the equipment, mostly the mics that we had at the time, were just not for such a place.
with the
So
noise.
the
yeah,
noise, so we ran into a couple of
Yeah.
sound issues there. So
Well, some of them you couldn't even hear anything, and we
yeah.
had oh now I forgot her name. The MLA came on.
that's right. We had quite a few people
We had a
there.
whole bunch of people that came up to the show and then had
Yeah.
equipment on display. We had like 4 or 5 episodes, I
We
think.
did.
And we were all gone. So anyway, then we had to prep. We got to
Yeah.
CIM, and that's how we ended up with these mics
That's right.
because they're directional and they don't pick up all
the sound
echo.
around. Yeah, that's that. So yeah, our official launch was at CIM a year ago.
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think we started the show. It was all about we still wanted to be the voice of industry, but I think initially, like, we started a Facebook group called the Industrial Alliance of Canada, which we still have, and that people
Yep.
we still post in that and that. But it was very much like just basically an all-out push for
Yeah.
basically everything industry was good. But then as we started the show started to evolve. I think we added in that sort of that element of to tell the story of
Mhm.
heavy industry,
Yeah.
which is every good story has ups and downs, and so really we look at technology, we've looked at the political stuff, we've looked at the financial aspects. We've really just gone through the story, good and bad, the environmental challenges,
Mhm.
everything. And I think that's sort of where our show's evolved, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So this episode we've decided to kind of make it a special episode
Yeah.
for our viewers in celebration of our 1 year anniversary. So we're gonna give you a quick little list of our own favorite episodes, or
Oh.
the ones that we kind of found
Yeah.
were just kind of popped out for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we should probably do the sponsors first, right?
Yes, before we
Because-
do anything
yeah.
else.
Look at me reminding. Huh.
I know. Wow.
I'm getting organized here, guy.
Apparently, this morning is not my morning.
No, but it was cool because we have a new sponsor today.
We do.
Who's
Who
a
was also part of the show at one point.
Yeah, so it's cool. It's the cool thing about the show is that a lot of the sponsors are, not all of them, but a lot of them are people that have come or companies that have come on the show.
That's right.
And sponsorship is not very expensive here. We're just kind of trying to cover some of the costs. So it's kind of neat when people come on the show. They come on for free. They give us their knowledge, give the audience knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and then they sort of when they sort of reciprocate it with sponsoring us sometimes. So it's pretty cool. So
It is.
Yeah, let's see who we got today.
Well, I'll start with our our new sponsor. Does it feel like you're drilling and blasting blind? Could your MWD measurements be better? The Data Cloud platform shows your lithology changes in real time for better blasting and fragmentation profiles. Check out their IoT sensors and cloud computing platform at datacloud.com and learn how you can know your rock today.
Yeah, and they just opened an office in Vancouver.
That's right, they
Yeah,
did.
very cool. Very
Yes.
cool company. And, I mean, they've been on the show. They're just a good group of people and with a very good technology. Okay, and next.
And next, we've got Savinaw Equipment. If you need everything from slurry pumps to jaw crushers to ball mills to conveyors, go to the leader in used mining equipment. You can visit Savinaw Equipment at savinawequipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day, and electrical too.
You know, with Savinaw, I've been thinking for the last month or so to get them back on the show. What I want to do is I want to go over some projects, like because I've been on a couple of the mine sites tearing them down. It is sometimes like you're in a closed buildings and you're trying to lift out like a cone crusher or jaw crusher. Or, no, generally a cone will be in the actual building. And I remember working on one one of the we spend hours just rigging it because if we tilted it, the cone it could damage itself by if you didn't distribute the weight. So we had to lift it inside a building, and so I had to go way up these stairs because the chain, and I had to just sit there, and it was like it had to lift a long way, and I just sitting there pulling this chain and all these levers, and then they'd pull their chains, and it was just a slow, and it was the only way to get it out unless we would tear the building down. So I would like to get Savinaw just to talk about some of these projects that they've done.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, let me just do one.
Oh, we got one more.
We've got one more.
Oh, goodness.
We're also brought to you by Resource World magazine. They report on the business of mining, oil and gas, green technologies, and the events that affect these sectors. Catch their April-May issue and see all the latest news at resourceworld.com. Awesome.
Yeah.
Those are our sponsors.
Yeah.
If you want to become a sponsor, you can contact us, info@crownsmen.com. Send us an email or visit crownsmen.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Please sponsor us or come on as a guest.
Or a guest, absolutely. We're always looking
both.
for guests. Which is, yeah.
That's what most people
That's
do.
even better.
Yes.
All right.
So, we were talking about sort of how to do it. I think we did a couple interviews that we didn't launch. I'm just going to be completely frank. A couple of interviews we didn't launch because they were not good interviews. From CIM, I remember Rory was running, and by the way, Rory was a huge part of kicking off our show.
It's so sad that he unfortunately couldn't be here to celebrate with us.
That's that thing of living in a different town.
Yeah.
But he does run our office out of there, so it's good. But he was just running all over the show, getting people to come on the show, and most of them were good, but a couple of them were just like. I'm not going to name names.
No.
But it was just so dry, and they were, and I just about 30 seconds into the conversation, you're like, I don't know where to go with this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it was. I mean, it was different having a podcast at a trade show. It's not something that people or that has been done. I can't say it hasn't been done, but it definitely wasn't something that they were used to.
Yeah.
So it was quite interesting to see, and Rory was just
was
fantastic at kind of bringing them in, and they were just kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing.
They didn't really know what they were in for.
So
lights are on them, cameras on them.
Yeah.
Now I like in our studio because it's sort of a protected. You get a chance to a week before you go over the topics so people can kind of get their confidence up.
Yeah.
But
it was interesting.
I feel bad for some of them. But we had. When we were first started, the first day, which is sort of like an evening thing, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Michael Winship came by, and he's the former president of CIM Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I say former, it's because what happens, I think they can only, don't quote me on this, even though I'm being quoted on live right now. I think it's every 2 years or something they change.
Something like that.
So he'd done it for a couple of years, and he'd been, I think he's run mining companies. He's been involved in
a lot of stuff,
a little bit in the interview, I think. But he kind of came by our booth and kind of checked it out because, again, it was very different,
it was,
right?
yeah, it was.
Because also we had cameras and lights.
We also had a bunch of little Martys that people were just in love with. Like, we have a big Marty here, but we had little Martys,
that we were handing out.
Yeah, that we were just kind of giving away. So people were just stopping by
Yeah,
constantly.
we had the high Gs out.
That's right,
We had
yeah.
a big part of our table was a display for power zones. We had so much stuff going on. We had the big bottle of scotch on the table.
I think that was like a massive pull in.
Crazy for that. It was but it was this big, black box with the
I
thing.
don't even remember what it was.
I don't know. I just remember it was expensive. And anyway, so he came by and he was just, he was just asking us what we were doing, trying to figure it out. And so he said, well, we'll sit down for an interview. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And he just sat down. And so I think we should watch that interview.
Let's do it.
That was our first interview of an official launch of the Crownsmen Podcast.
I'm glad we saved it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Take a look.
Alrighty. I'm with Michael Winship. You are the former, you'll have to explain how your position.
I'm the past president of the Canadian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy. So glad to meet you, Jarrett.
Good to meet you. Yeah, we kind of pulled you in off the street, so to speak, at the show to join our podcast.
Yeah, well, you have an interesting concept here, so I thought I'd just sit down with you and have a bit of a chat.
Yeah. You're the past president. Could you explain? Let's start with a little bit about CIM, just the organization behind it, what this event is for the industry, and we would start there.
Great. Well, the Canadian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy, CIM as we call ourselves, we've been in business for 120 years. We were started by an act of parliament, so we have quite a good history. And we represent Canadian mining professionals. We're a technical or a knowledge-sharing organization. And we've developed quite a history of sharing information through things like periodicals, magazines, and events like this, annual conference. So here we're focused in two main areas to share information with our members. One is, I'll say, a more technical side of the program is the papers that will be delivered at the various venues tomorrow. And then the other part is quite a practical operational thing that mixes the suppliers to the mining industry with our technical professionals and the people who operate and make purchasing decisions for mines and so forth. So this part of the trade show is quite interesting and helpful for everyone.
Yeah, it attracts a lot of people. I've had clients be at this show before, and I mean you get quite. I mean, kind of everybody shows up for it. It's one of the biggest mining shows in Canada. Is it not?
Yeah, if not internationally.
Yes.
For professional crowds, and you have the whole gamut of people who build mines, operate mines. You have financial people, mining executives. You have the mine suppliers. I just came from a meeting of all the mining universities in Canada that have programs. So there's quite a diverse group of people that'll come through our CIM National Conference.
Yeah, it struck me when you said 120 years old. Obviously, mining has changed since 120 years ago. How is the organization? I mean, going back that far, is the function still the same now as it was 120 years ago?
No, I think we're constantly evolving from the times or with the times. So I mean, you're showing leadership here with this type of approach with a podcast.
Yeah.
So we're moving into the digital era and the social media as well, and that's important for the younger generation of professionals that come up, that we're using different ways of sharing information, and so we're strong at the CIM on IT and web development and various ways to share our information digitally.
And what's your background? You've been involved in the organization quite a long time, haven't you? And with the mining industry in general, right?
Yeah, I hate to date myself, but
we don't need exact dates.
I've been involved with mining for about 40 years, and I've been a member of the CIM for about 40 years, and I'm a mining engineer by trade, and I guess I've been active in 6 continents, both operating mines and building mines. So that was my passion, I guess, is the operational side, and ended up as an executive and I've been on some public company boards. But this last 3 years, I guess my primary focus has been to support the CIM in a presidency role.
What's a challenge that having that background with? I guess I should ask first. What stages have you been involved with mines?
Well, I've been involved with the picking up from the exploration phase where there's some types of metals have been identified that the geologists have found, and then it's quantifying it into ore reserves and then going through on the studies from preliminary economic evaluations through to feasibility, through to the project engineering, the construction, and then ultimately commissioning and putting them in operation.
Do you see now, well, you said 40 years, so you would have seen some changes.
Yeah.
Sorry to date you. But what are some of the major challenges that mines are facing now getting off the ground and maybe even opposed to 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Have you seen a new set of challenges, or is it the same? And what are those challenges?
Well, there's some similar challenges as always finding the mineral resources.
Yeah.
And turning them into metals economically and making some money. So that I'd say that's somewhat of a similar process. But I think what's growing over the more recent years is we have a lot more focus on the environment, the sustainability aspect, interacting with communities. The regulatory requirements have expanded astronomically. So I think in the past, maybe when I started my career, if you found a good deposit, maybe you could fast track it through in several years. Now I would say normally it's going to take you at least 10 years from when you've found something that looks quite interesting through to permitting and being able to put that mine in production.
And do you think those, obviously different countries and their regulations and different provinces and regions and all, but do you think there's any sort of movement to expedite that process, or were we seeing this trend of it slowing down more and more? Is that going to continue on?
I think it's slowing down, and there's more regulatory requirements just about across the world. There's still some areas you can get into more quickly and maybe have more support for mining, but typically it's quite a process to be able to go through let's call it the social or the sustainability side, to have the supports of communities and indigenous people and the permitting and so forth.
And do you think, obviously you're not going to single anybody out, but do you think mines in general are learning to do that though? There was, you'll hear some, and sometimes maybe the media doesn't report exactly as it is, but are mines getting better at it as opposed to trying to get that mine pushed through? Are they getting better at communicating with the indigenous communities that they're impacting, the environmental assessments and communicating that with the public? Are they starting to learn that? Because it is a big transition that they just didn't deal with in the same way 40 years ago.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely been a learning experience, but clearly that social side of the business, it's as important as the technical or the financial side. You got to have all three legs of the stool strong, and so we've brought in other professionals such as community affairs people and environmental engineers and anthropologists and human resource specialists that perhaps weren't as critical or needed as much in the past.
Yeah. At this event, I know there's a lot of forums and so a lot of people that are watching this will be attending this event. Is there any sort of highlights, ones that you would recommend? You were recommending one here about government policy. I know I'm going to be sneaking away to check out. Are there some other ones?
Yeah, well, the federal government's did some roundtable work with the CIM executives yesterday, and then on Tuesday there's a solicitation of input to anyone who's a delegate here. So I've encouraged that. I think our plenary session tomorrow will have quite a number of interesting industry executives. That'll be quite a good session to take in. I'm chairing a session on mine safety tomorrow afternoon, so I'd plug that one. That's an integral part of the mining industry, making sure we can do it safely. So
yeah, that's good. What room is that in?
That's
You got to track that down.
That's a good question. It's spread through the conference where the different safety streams are, but it'll be in the pamphlet.
There'll be some interesting. I guess that has something that's changed too. Is mine safety is a completely different than it was. I mean, even within the last 5 years, there's been major changes.
Yeah, we've made huge gains within the mining industry. We've really decreased lost time accidents and medical aids and so forth, but we still have the occasional fatality. Those have trended down as well, but zero is our absolute goal. And so we're still working hard to ensure that everybody goes home to their family at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, it's a couple things. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm going to dig one more. So what are the couple major things safety-wise that the mining industry as a whole has taken on to increase safety?
Well, you could look in two areas. One is safety leadership, so to ensure you have commitment from the boards through the C-suite to the general managers, right down to frontline supervisors, and engaging the workforce so that safety leadership's integral. Putting in safety systems like risk assessment and so forth, so you understand what sort of hazards you may face. And there's a lot of tools and systems in those areas. We're moving now into quite a bit of automation, as you'd be aware of, and
it's one of our shows coming up. Yeah,
moving people away from the face, so to speak. In the underground, in the open pit, we have autonomous mining vehicles. So we hear a lot in the news about driverless cars. Well, the mining industry's actually been doing it for some time now and had success, and that's actually led to tremendous safety gains with those type of initiatives.
Yeah. I really, from the research I've done, I don't think people outside the mining circles realize how innovative mining is with the technology that they're using.
Yeah, well, I think we've been weak in the mining industry, but I think having young people and marketing specialists like you can help us in that area. So that's maybe why I agreed to be here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Michael, thank you very much for taking the time. Appreciate you, and thanks for being a part of putting on this event. It is a huge support to the industry.
Have
so
a good
appreciate
conference.
It.
Yeah.
Right,
CIM welcomes you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah. So that was our first interview of the CIM, first real launch where we actually had proper equipment. I'm curious how we did. If anybody's watching that show, I'm wondering. I know. I'll say where I think I'll go for my own improvement. I didn't. Now I'm doing it again, but I was able to. I was able to drive the show a little more. So when you first start, you're just to formulate a question. It seems like it would be easy, but on camera and you're dealing with somebody's company and it's their brand and they're a guest and you've never met them before. I just quickly gained an appreciation for these people there's people that do shows every single day.
Yeah.
And TV, and there's then they've got certain time frames it's really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
We have this easy format where we just kind of meander through for an hour. And was it like you thought it would be during the show?
You know what? It was, I don't know, now that I look back, I don't know if I had kind of an idea of what it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that compared to when we started at our launch at CIM to now, I think that because it was our first, it was the first few episodes and CIM was happening, and I was also, my mind was podcast and the booth, and it was kind of all over the place. It was very I think we've come a long way. We were definitely a little more nervous, and the fact that because it was at CIM, it was hard to get guests in. So a lot of the times, like you said, we were kind of just chit-chatting about trying to get
Yeah.
the podcast going
I
and
forgot
moving
about that.
until
Yeah.
until Rory was like, "Oh, I have someone," right?
Yeah, because we were starting at set times, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was, or someone, of course, because CIM was happening. They were busy at their own booth. So it was like, oh, they would schedule for a certain time. We were like, great. And then here we are at the podcast and we're doing the episode and everything's running. And then we get Rory comes in and says, oh, sorry, they can't make it. So we were, we were kind of stuck there trying to move the episode forward. So in that sense, I think we've come a long way because now, our episode starts with our guest here.
Yeah.
So there's no more kind of like, oh no, what do we do now?
Yeah, they're already in the room.
That's right, yeah.
I actually forgot about that part of it. It was like we actually started a few shows without the guest
Without
there
the
yet.
guest,
It
yeah.
was it's
So that was difficult. I think that was our major difficulty for that show was just kind of going in blind, I would
Yeah.
say.
The other thing that I was thinking about when you were saying is getting those guests on is the first while of trying to get guests. Like now, when I reach out to somebody on LinkedIn or even phone in office, I mean, some people still obviously don't want to come on the show, but a lot of people they check it out and they see who we've got on, and they see our style. They see it's not like a news outlet where we're trying to like dig for a story. We're trying to find out the technology and the strategy. Little one of Butter's hairs.
Oh no.
We're trying to figure out. We're trying to dig into their company
Yeah.
and what makes them a good company. Obviously, if there's something that's negative that comes out, it comes out. But that's not our goal. And I think that, and all the episodes that we have now, people are comfortable with it.
Exactly. Exactly what you said. It's for CIM. It was our first official podcast, I guess you could say. So, nobody knew who we were, what we were trying to do.
We didn't even know who we were.
So that kind of also made it a little harder to get guests to kind of sit
Yeah.
in. They didn't know what was happening, especially what kind of questions we were going to be asking. So it was a little
that
harder.
was a big one, especially for the bigger companies.
Exactly.
What are you actually going to be talking about?
Yeah. So I mean, it's understandable. They got to be very precautious. Now, exactly what you said. They're able to see all our previous episodes and get that feel of what we're trying to do and what the podcast is about.
Yeah.
To make their decision when they want to be on the podcast or not.
Yeah. And a lot of people. We got our lineup. The next 4 episodes is quite extensive.
Yeah.
I want to get into. We kind of prepped this for the show. Our top 3 each.
Yes.
You said that I'm going first, so I guess that's what we're doing. I thought it was ladies first, but I guess we're
Save
reversed.
the best for last is what I'm going for.
I was wondering what you were up to. Okay. So I tried to pick, I mean, so many interviews have been fun, but I tried to pick, my 3 were, of the best shows we've done, are sort of that they either surprised me or kind of opened my eyes to something, or I felt they challenged viewers, or, there was on a personal level. The first one for me was at CIM. Bombardier came on, and that was one of the ones that Rory, you were working so hard to organize the booth and everything. I basically sat there the whole show.
That's true.
And Rory was running around, and Bombardier was so hesitant to come on. They're such a big company. They've got media attention. And Marcus DePaz was running their booth. And they were just a couple rows over from us, and Rory just wouldn't let it go. He just wouldn't let it go. And I think it was finally the last day that Bombardier decided to come on. And it was good that they came on because their show was one of the most popular shows of our podcast. People loved it. Their team, their marketing team, once we got it done and sent it to them, they shared it out into their network. And so I think that sort of established for us. Not only was it technology that they were doing, because they were doing underground train technology, we'll see that interview in a second, but it also established for us we can give a voice to even a big company, because Bombardier gets news coverage, but they don't get the coverage of their technology so much. That's
Yeah.
not what news is usually when there's conflict or something bad happens.
Of course.
So I it kind of, even for myself, it established that we can give a voice to these companies.
Yeah.
And so I think we should watch that interview, just a few minute clip of the highlight from that interview.
Awesome.
When you say scalable, I noticed that it's reliable, flexible, scalable.
Mhm.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, if you can give me your pen,
Of course.
for example, if you have a congested road, people normally will say, okay, we will have to build more roads so that more cars can go. In the case of the trains, it's not necessary. You can have only one rail, and then you will need, let's say, a station where you can have a loop. And then you will have only one tunnel for one rail. This maximizes your capex. Why would you have two when it's not necessary? And
Yeah.
that's the brain of the system. So
Right.
the system will manage how far would the trains go.
And it's managing it itself.
So this is it's a program, and then you will have someone sitting in a control center, and then he will be, depending how you're feeding the system, because maybe some loading stations are not full with material, and then you have to redirect the train to another station.
Right.
So that's where you will be doing these calculations.
So when you're talking about scalable, you're talking about scalable within
Yes.
the
So-
infrastructure already in
Yes.
place.
Yes, so you can be building up bit by bit. So maybe at the beginning you only need 3-4 trains, and maybe after that then you will increase the capacity.
Yeah.
So then you will make it scalable, and then you can put them closer.
Yeah.
So then depending how this is, in order to avoid that the trains are all waiting on the unloading station just to unload, and then you're also losing time. So you need to see how the trains are all the time moving.
You make it sound simple, but it is incredible.
It
It is
is.
incredible technology. I'm gonna continue on watching this.
Then you see there's no that's the balises, so you will have on the wayside nothing, so no cabling.
Right.
And then you will have different options of telecommunication. It could be LTE. Then you could use cameras.
Right.
And then you can interconnect additional features like, I don't know, detection of people walking around, or you can put more automation on this once you have a better telecommunication in the mine.
And it would depend on that mine's needs, their setup, their
yeah.
operation.
I don't know if they want then to have driverless trucks or driverless different kind of equipment they would like to have.
And existing sensory technology that they've got in the
Yeah.
mine, yeah.
So you see that's the unloading station, and the train would be basically traveling through.
You know, this thing it's an easy thing to bypass, because again, it makes it look so easy. I've been out to plants, agriculture, where they're trying to unload, and I mean, I'm watching it stop,
Yes.
turn,
Yes.
and these are big, multi-billion-dollar
And
plants.
can you imagine if one gets stuck and then you lose a half day there? Then what is that for a loss for the mine?
Okay, my pick number 2 would be when Frank Antoine came on the show.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Frank was. I went to. Where I lived. I come from a place called Deadman's Valley. Some people that watch the show know this. I come from a place called Deadman's. My father has a company called Savanaugh Equipment. You know,
Right, yep.
that has that does use mine equipment in a little town called Savanaugh. So I grew up in that area, the interior of BC. And in grade 10, I went to the band, the Skeechiston Indian Band, they opened a school. So I went to that school. Frank was I forget what it was called, kind of like a teacher's assistant, but he was kind of, this wasn't the teacher's assistant. He was kind of running the social element of the school. So he
Okay.
was just kind of working with all the kids and talking to them, and he played sports with us. He was kind of like the PE teacher as well, and so then years later several years later we kind of reconnected again and golfing and became friends, and then Frank's life really, and I'm not going to tell his story, but he really transformed his life and has become a leader in his community. He's become respected in these different networks that he's in. And he's just really an amazing voice for the Indigenous people and for Canadians too. He really is about unifying. And so when he he's not really even in heavy industry now. He's in tourism, but he wanted to come on the show, and he talked so honestly and so openly with us. And we're gonna hear a clip specifically about Frank talking about the relationship between Indigenous and local communities with the mining communities or the mining operations that are around those communities. So let's take a listen to that one. Well, you and I had an interesting conversation just a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the relationship between heavy industry, Indigenous people, and I'm always, whenever I use that, that kind of terminology, Indigenous people are also living besides other communities, and they're mixed in. So it's sort of limiting to just say, because it's the relationship between heavy industry and the communities around them, which include the Indigenous people. But, on a general, and we'll dig into it a little more as the show goes, how do you view a mine that's right next to, Bonaparte, or within an hour's driving distance? How does what is your view, and what do you think the general feel is of the communities that are beside these mines?
Well, I guess it goes back to the generations that have lived in that country or lived in that area for quite a while time, and following the different other industries before the mining industry came into play in our area, ranching industry, the forest industry, obviously were the main employers of that area. So when the mining industry came in, you got to, back then job was a job, and it was an opportunity to have a better lifestyle. And it didn't matter what color your skin was. It was just to better your life so your children have a better life. And I figure, when you see the pipelines and everybody comes in, it's almost a double-edged sword for Indigenous communities now, depending on where their economic development is. And there are some very keen communities that followed suit and started doing the due diligence of following the economic growth in their communities, depending on what industries were around them. For example, my community, definitely and some of my family are involved in that mining industry that work in there. So, again, it's not something, it's more of an individual choice now versus it was a community standstill with it.
Yeah.
So definitely different views now from a leadership role where I was in as a counselor for 2 years. How do you stand with these industries that come into your territory? How do you consult? Where do you come from? So again, it's the community values, and again, if you're an economic provider in your community or a driver in that community, it's really going to showcase where your community is going to be with these industries.
The third one was tough for me to pick.
Really?
It was, because there's so many good. I'm glad you picked some of these other ones. And then we're going to go through some honorable mentions.
Yeah.
We're just going to basically go through a list of some of the other interviews so people can check them out. But the third one I picked was not so much. It was a good interview. It was with Eric Beckwith, and he's the CEO of Freighterra. And what Freighterra does is amazing. The information he did on the interview was great. But towards the end, which is so often where so much good stuff comes, because everybody gets relaxed by the end and they just start talking.
That's right.
And so at the end of the show, we ended up, his wife is Russian, and so we talked about, we started talking about the Russian economy, this super highways and high-speed trains, and it was... And even online, a lot of people, we've gotten comments on that part of the show because we released the highlight of it. Yeah. And what I liked about that show is it wasn't, it was a call for political peace, but it was just providing information, and it's so hard. And I haven't traveled near as much as I like to, but there's so much misinformation around. And a lot of times that's what sort of separates people. Is not always. Sometimes there's real issues that do separate people. But a lot of the times, not politically, but just the general public gets separated by these ideas that sometimes are just not there, that they're just not true. And it's one thing to have conflict when there is real conflict, but it's another thing to walk around thinking something. And so I just thought when he was talking about their economy, and how Russia is one of the leaders in GMO-free organic food, and just these
Yeah.
interesting things. It just give you an insight into somewhere that most of us will never see, and sort of seeing where they're advancing and relating that back to where we can advance. So I thought it was a pretty interesting thing. So let's watch that, or watch or listen, depending on the platform,
Yeah.
to that interview with Eric Beckwith.
So this is the Trans-Siberia project, not just Trans-Siberia, called Trans-Bering project. And this is actually Interbering. See, it says source Washington Post, the Schiller Institute, Interbering 2016. So there's the Russians and the Chinese are totally interested in this. They're totally interested in funding this. We've been on the Trans-Siberia Railroad all the way east to where it ends right here right now. They're actually proposing right now to build this track. They have it in their budget actually to build the track out to that point right there. And there's only a limited amount of track that needs to be built, primarily actually in Canada, connecting up into Alaska. There's definitely
so some
track.
of it's the infrastructure, some of it's already there.
Oh, yeah, a lot of it's there. It's actually a very little bit of connecting that has to be done. But the bottom line is that this sees there's the proposed Canadian segment, there's proposed, and there's the rest of it right there. And we'll have to enlarge this to actually see it. But
Yeah,
here's
we'll bring
the
it up
most
on the
important
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that we have the technology, we have the resources. The Russians and the Chinese are all over funding it on their side, which is much more of the work, to actually build an intercontinental railway system that would be a combination of high-speed trains and freight trains. It could all be zero-emission electric. That would totally connect the old world and the new world. Okay, and it's perfectly feasible. As I recall, the Bering project. It's 60 miles of underground tunnel or a bridge. It's like $60 billion. It's an infrastructure project. And a country could take on, let alone internationally could take on, right? And let alone, well, if you got Wall Street and the European markets just fund it privately, right?
Yeah.
So and what that would enable is, first of all, it would enable the movement of agricultural goods like the Canadian wheat to China. It would enable all the tourist people that don't want to fly, that don't want to go by ship. We don't want to go by ship anymore. To sit on a train. I love trains. And go to Paris.
I just got back from Japan. It was just the train system. It's amazing.
Yeah, all right. It's basically, it's almost inevitable as long as we can just maintain peace between all the different countries and just work this out in terms of global economic integration. So we've been promoting that. We promoted that in Silicon Valley. The issue is when in the United States, North America, people are like, what? What's that? In Asia, they're like, yeah, we know all about that. We're building that.
Yeah.
Here, they're like, oh, yeah, what are you smoking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not smoking anything. I'm just like, that's inevitable, dudes. So anyway.
Sounds so unrealistic.
Yeah, but we want to make that in our lifetimes. We want to see that happen.
Oh, that would
Absolutely.
be fantastic.
So are you talking? Is there potential and talk of this for in between large waterways? Like, are we talking about training underground, or
well,
is
no,
that sort of
remember
off
the
the
Bering
radar?
Strait where we walked. When people came to the New World for the first time, it was during this glacial period, and this was actually the sea levels were much lower, and you could walk. The continents were connected.
Yeah.
There's only 60 miles that separates it. And it's very shallow water that separates the new and the old world right there. So
Right.
that tunnel goes through that close point, and there's actually 3 islands halfway through. So you don't even have to, in the middle of it, you actually come above ground again. So it's actually segments. It's like a 30-mile segment and a 30-mile segment and some short segments. So it's not an engineering problem. It's just a matter of a political problem of actually just getting it done, right? Okay, investment in political. So we're promoting it because it would be great to be able to move all this stuff via electric rail.
Yeah.
Between continents, in addition to inside the continents.
Yeah. And people.
And people, yes, and people, and also, and we're not even talking about like putting in the Hyperloop system. And one of our clients in our previous company was an airline pilot who developed the Hyperloop system map for the whole world, and we published it because he wanted to see this 5,000-mile-an-hour super train that connected the entire continents.
And I think they're building that in.
Yeah, they're building segments of it, but that's like futuristic, and we're just talking about regular height trains and maglev train technology that's been around 50 years here.
Yeah.
We don't have to go to Hyperloop. Hyperloop can follow it eventually.
Yeah.
But then it's 5,000 miles an hour. You don't see anything. You
Yeah.
just like zip, and you're like in a spaceship, and it decelerates, and you're in Moscow.
That's
It's
right.
like get off, and I
It's
just
not
got
the
on.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too fast.
Yeah.
I think the whole point of
Yeah.
traveling on a train
Yeah.
is to see everything, right?
Yeah,
Is to
exactly.
see the beauty of the world.
That's right.
But you said, I think you mentioned, I mean, they're using this.
Oh yeah, no, whole
around.
segments of this all over. First of all, China is investing right now $1 trillion in connecting into the interior like this through Kazakhstan, etc. They've already shipped the first goods from China to England this way because it's actually much safer and faster than sending it around. Like they send it in 14 days on the existing train network. So that this is already in progress. This is all in. This infrastructure over here is all in place. I've been on it. That's the Trans-Siberia Railroad. It's fantastic. There's actually 2 tracks, one here and one here. So we're just talking about this part of it right here and a little bit in Alaska and a part right here in Canada. The rest of it's all built. So it's connecting it. It's
Yeah.
connecting the rail systems.
But
Most of that stuff was
that-
done in the 19th century.
This section up here, though, that politically, that's going to be the tough one.
Yeah, and also, the environment community will be worried about the
Yeah.
exploitation of resources up there. There's a bunch of things. Mostly it's a matter of relations between Russia and the United States. That's the big one. It's just having good relations between Russia and the United States.
For a sustained period of time while
Yeah,
this
and
all gets.
I'm married. I'm a product of the peace and prosperity after the fall of the Soviet Union, funded by all these forward-looking people in Washington and in New York who sent me to Russia, to the Soviet Union again and again. And so I know all these scientists, and I'm married to a Russian, and so I don't have any troubles with the Russians. I know the Russians well, but it's just a matter of politics. And the Russians are ready when they're ready. You want to sign in something? We'll sign. They're just like, okay, you want to growl? We'll growl.
Yeah.
So, but they're all there, mostly raising their children and drinking vodka and producing a lot of organic food and waiting for us to come to our senses and say, let's shake hands again. Let's
Yeah.
build a train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's, and I don't, when I come back from a trip and I'll get asked things about a country, and I go there sometimes not realizing, and it's just so much of it is education that people just don't, especially if you haven't traveled, you can't understand, how do I say it, the differences that people think that we have are usually not, but the difference is that the way that they think we're the same are actually the opposite. Like I found in Japan, there are certain elements that I thought would be different, but I found, no, I integrate fine into here. But then there was other things I just didn't see coming that were just different. The way that they follow systems. In their train, I went to slide a train open. And in Vancouver, if you go to hold the door open, a guard might even help you. They've got your hand on their shoulder, they're pulling you back, right? And so there's these differences. And I don't know how we approach it. I guess on a political level, that's about, or in business. Those are kind of the two platforms you can do it. Because individuals, unless you're traveling to these countries, I don't really think you can understand that Russia is growing a whole bunch of organic food. I mean, where are you going to get that information? Why would you get that
Why would
information?
you know? No, it's very important to travel as much as you can, because you're constantly understanding other cultures, again, how similar they are, understanding what the world looks like from the perspective of those people. But I can tell you that having been traveling to Russia since late Soviet times, when it was in depression and it was terrible, it was hopeless, the Russians are doing so much better than ever before. They've just built the interstate highway system like in the 1950s in the United States. They've just built the first high-speed highway system. They've rebuilt all their infrastructure. The sports stadiums are all new. If you fly over it, it's just construction as far as the eye can see. And this is under sanctions. They're thriving. They're building kindergartens, schools. There's lots of young children again because there was a depression. There was no children for a while. It was really scary. They just couldn't afford to have children. So they're doing really well. The only thing right now is just internationally is just removing the sanctions, et cetera, and just restoring good relations. But internally and agriculturally, agriculture output hasn't been seen since the revolution. They're competing on the world stage and outproducing wheat. Everyone is afraid of them, how fast they're producing wheat.
Yeah.
And they're totally non-GMO, and they're totally focused on organic food, leading the world in organic food, which is like, what?
Okay, so those are my 3 picks.
Awesome.
And there's a lot to choose from. We've done a lot of episodes over there.
Yeah, I know. It was definitely very hard to kind of go through all of our episodes and say, oh, these were the great ones. So I based my 3 more on what I learned. I mean, I didn't grow up, well, I guess I grew up more in the construction industry with, most of my family in the construction industry. So it's very different. So first off was Streamline with Dan De Palma. So for that, I found that it was interesting to hear from someone in the industry with automation in vehicles and that, how far away are we from a full automated vehicle, especially for transportation, right? So it was interesting to kind of hear what he thought about that and what the future holds for us. So let's take a look at that.
Well, the automation, controlling speed and braking and all this type of thing, the driverless semi-truck going down the Coquihalla, that's hard to say when that. It probably will come, but it's a ways
time.
out. What about the automation though in the braking speed? Those types of things. How close is that to being standard in?
I don't think it's that close to being
No.
standard, but it's right there for us.
Yeah.
And I really believe we're leaders in that space, believe it or not. Like from this corner of the world. I think it's something that it's a step towards maybe getting to the autonomous vehicle at some point. But, you know, when we talk about like the example of, you know, the 2 strikes, if you don't behave on this site, those are specifically the use cases we're getting right now. Like, we have a closed environment, and you know what? I'm not sure if I want to drive through the city and manage everything they do. I'm not sure my head's there yet.
Yeah.
But I know in certain pockets of the route, I don't want to mess around anymore. I want to take control of it there.
Yeah.
I don't want to monitor. I want to control.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a huge market for it, because any listener that is out there right now, I bet you could come up with a number of situations or locations where they would say, yeah, that does actually make sense there.
Yeah. Would it control acceleration as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Because acceleration is cost.
That's
Acceleration
cost.
is safety.
Yeah.
Right? Accelerating and decelerating at rapid pace is aggressive driving. You're trying to eliminate aggressive driving.
Right.
It's, again, habits done well.
Yeah.
So you get in your vehicle, you're not aggressive, you're not racing to the stop sign and putting your brakes on, you're going to run your brakes out.
Yeah. Now, is this being used, this isn't really commonplace in Canada yet.
No.
But is it like in the U.S.? Are they using this? Like, are there fleets that have this?
Not to
No.
that extent, no. There would be some that would take external technologies, put it in the cab, and be able to mitigate tailgate, collision avoidance, the things that we have in our personal vehicles.
Right. Yeah.
Take it and put it in a fleet of a bunch of different trucks
Right.
that are older, right? The thing about automation is you could say, okay, well, new vehicles have some of these features already, so why does it matter? Well, fleets aren't built with new vehicles, and it takes time to turn a fleet.
Right.
So you still have to operate in that period of time.
The truck will last years.
100%.
Yeah.
It depends on how many miles and kilometers. It depends on where jurisdiction.
Right.
So you still have this, you know, multiple fleet, multiple age, multiple brands that don't all offer the same features, same safety features or control features. So that's where we could come in agnostically and put it in a vehicle and do it amongst an entire fleet.
All right. So my second pick was actually Data Cloud, who is our new sponsor.
Yeah. I was so close. Streamline and Data Cloud. I was so close. Yeah.
It's just not easy. Again, it was something that I don't know a lot about. So it was I looked at Data Cloud before they came on the show. And, you know, they've got lots of information, but it's one of those things that it doesn't matter how much you read about it. You still don't understand until someone can explain it to you and show you what it is. So for me, that episode was great because we got to kind of see what that sensor, how it works, where it's placed, what it's supposed to do, all that kind of thing. So that was just, I mean, I was like, I was so confused when we came into the show. I mean, you read about it and you kind of have an idea, but then your mind's just blown by, whether you were right or wrong on what you thought it was. So it was nice to see the video that he showed and talked about it. Yeah. So let's take a look at that episode.
Yeah, cool. You've mentioned the high resolution. I think we should take a minute. I think anybody who's joined us would probably love to see that. Where would we find that? Would it be on the
if you
website
go
or
to
should it be
the
the videos?
just go to the home page.
Okay.
If you click on, I think we should have a video. Maybe if you scroll down a little bit, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
This is kind of
Can we make that full size, Gowdy? On the is there a little button on the bottom? Oh, there it is.
There we go.
all right, great. So Data Cloud in a minute. I thought it was 30 seconds, but I see it's a minute.
That's okay.
So that's the sensor. That's the IoT device, what we call the Rhino. Mounts on the drill steel. It measures those vibrations when the drill bit's cutting through the rocks. Communicates wirelessly, as you're seeing now, with an edge device that's in the cab, the driller's cab. That information is then processed on the edge device, initial processing. Streams to the cloud. That's where the heavy lift, the machine learning is applied, and the geostatistical algorithms. And then it goes right into the client's block model on their laptop. And
So this is actually what they're getting right
this
here?
is what they get. This is an example of a pattern that we logged in the Pilbara. Those are the blast holes.
Okay.
This is the density scale. So we measure the density in real time ore waste boundaries. I talked a little bit about geostopping at coal seams. And then this is essentially a pattern. Those are 15-meter deep blast holes, kind of 8-meter spacing on those. And what you wind up doing, what you saw with the green and the red on that, is density serves as a great proxy for us for ore waste boundary detection and iron ore formation. So then we can say to the client, there's the visualization of it. And the very useful thing that we also give them that's not captured on that video is we can give a shape file for just basically a DXF export to say, here's the contact, here's that planar contact between your ore waste boundaries. So then that can be loaded into their blasting programs. We're agnostic of how they want to use it, but our view is that we don't want to disrupt anything going on. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to assimilate the information. So they can log into a mine portal and access this information, or we can export it to them wherever and however they'd like to receive it within their existing workflows.
Oh, wow. All righty. So last but not least, my third favorite was PowerZone for a few reasons. Well, we've worked with PowerZone for quite some time now.
A couple years.
Yeah. So it was very different because I sit behind the computer and on the phone back and forth with their CEO, Don Taves and Carson Taves and, all these people from their business. And it was interesting to kind of finally put a face to the voice and vice versa. We were both
Colorado. We don't.
Exactly. Yeah. So for that, that itself was my reason. I was like, yay, I finally get to meet the CEO of the company I worked so hard to kind of help in that. So that was nice. The other thing was we talk so much about new and used mining equipment, not just mining equipment, but they also do oil and gas pumps and that. So it was nice to hear kind of what the process is to assure a client that their rebuilt or remanufactured, whatever whatever word you use for a used equipment, that it works right, that it's going to work, and they're making the right purchase. So that to me was interesting because we do work a lot like Savannah, who also deals with new and used mining equipment. So it was very nice to hear what PowerZone does to kind of put a client's mind at ease and how that process works, right?
And they actually laid out the actual steps too, right?
Exactly.
Not
so
just
that
like
to me,
we guarantee clients.
Exactly.
It's like, no, they actually have a process.
Exactly.
So
So that to me was it was fantastic. So let's take a look at that.
Cool. How do you outline that for the customer that you've delivered, that you've went in and done all those, and you haven't just done a paint job? Because once you close it back up, it is. So, and I know, I asked this question because I know that there are steps that you take to do that.
Yeah.
So how are you, especially to a new customer that's, they've maybe done a little bit of due diligence, but you're a fairly new customer to them. How do you show to them that we have done all this work? What is it? I mean, it can't just be brand. You must have a steps that you take through your engineering and that to show that we've done all these steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do a pretty extensive pictorial record of the rebuild.
Yeah.
And we love customer inspections. I mean, come bring it on, come and see us. We love it. They usually leave more impressed than what they come,
Yeah.
But then we do a full rebuild report, both a detailed, with all the numbers and clearances and stuff like that written in there. And then a little bit of a glossy, just to show them, with the pictorial record of how it came in and what was done, and how.
That's a progress. The pictorial progress. That's a good way to do it for customers.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, there's limits to that. If you set out to hide flaws, then you could probably still hide flaws. But we also have a vested interest in making sure that it'll actually work.
Right. Yeah. So. But you do all the documentation and even the pictorials, though.
Yeah.
So that's how a customer, even if they're
Typically.
new. Yeah.
Yeah. Typically we do.
Really good for overseas customers as well if they're not actually able to.
Yeah.
Come over and inspect.
Well, how many customers take advantage of, come on and see us? How many, do you get a lot of customers that'll actually, I mean, some of these projects are quite expensive, so I don't know how much the pumping is a cost in comparison to everything else. How many customers actually will come on to site?
Well, on the big expensive jobs, we probably meet in person with 80% of them.
Oh, is it that high?
Most of them will send a rep sooner or later.
Yeah.
It might not be before the order, but during the process.
Right.
somewhere.
Yeah. That was my next question. Are they're coming mid-process to sort of get a feel for what you're doing? And
A lot of times.
yeah.
And we like it. That's the best way.
Yeah. Well, it's a big question in the industry is how do you trust, you go to an auction site and the wheel loader rolls off from one truck onto yours. What are you getting?
Yeah.
And
It is what it is.
it is what it is. Yeah. So, but
We buy that way,
yeah,
Good way to buy.
they don't let you take it apart first.
And sometimes you're disappointed.
Yeah.
Most people are honest though. We buy a lot of stuff over the phone, and most people will treat you right. There's a few that'll hook you, but you don't want to lose faith in humanity right away.
Right. I guess you kind of over the years you kind of start to filter out who to.
Yeah, we do.
Who to avoid. Yeah. It's as large as the industry is in dollars wise. It's actually a very small community once it starts to break down.
You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, so we picked our top three. I remember you asked me, well, what about
everybody else?
Because we're singling out all the, and...
Let's be clear. They were all great. I think these ones just kind of stood out for us. And
the couple that weren't great, we didn't launch.
There you go.
So all the ones we've launched, there's good information. I have never done a show so far, even the people that weren't great interviews, a couple that we didn't air, they actually had a lot of good information. I mean, these people are experts in their field.
Yeah.
I remember a big difference. What you said about we were waiting for people to come on, we'd talk, but even we were planning to talk 15 minutes and then bring in a guest. And we realized so quickly trying to talk about these topics, it's better to get the guest on because they just understand their information so much. It's like it's kind of mind blowing how good they are.
Like I said, I mean, there's just so much that, at least for me, that I don't know about all these industries.
The more I thought I knew a little bit, and then every time we do a show, I go, I don't even. I feel guilty even doing like a mining, heavy industry, transportation, energy show thing. It's like
exactly.
You feel less and less qualified every episode.
But I think that's exactly the point. We're not here to tell you how much we know. No, it's more how much we want to know and how much we're trying to get other people to know about these industries and the companies, and trying to open the doors to these companies to work with others, right?
Yeah.
And kind of go over that bridge of for a lot of these companies, it's they're trying to find how to get into like the mining industry or the forestry industry, trying to and I think that I'm kind of glad that we kind of open up a platform for them to do that, right?
And to really explain themselves.
Yeah.
And like we'll go through a couple of these here. Like we had like Brent Hilscher came on, and he's specialized in the bulk ore processing and the particle sorting.
Yeah.
And I mean that is highly technical information, and that was again what people watch that show because we can see all the statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And on average, people watch that show longer than any other show.
Yeah.
Because people are hungry for information. This world where people want a 2-minute snapshot. Some people do. Again, I always say it on the show. But a lot of people are looking for good, solid information.
That's right, yeah.
We'll go through a couple of these other ones that we've done. Like with Savanaugh Equipment, they came on the show. So that was interviewing my brother. People like that show.
That was so interesting.
Yeah.
Let me just say, for me, it was so interesting because I look at the show and I'm like, oh my God, they look exactly alike. Like it's hard to tell you guys apart. I mean, I know both of you and I can definitely tell you guys apart. But when you see it on camera and you're like, wow, they're like they're very similar.
Well, even
So
some
it
of
was
the
interesting.
movement and
And
stuff.
the movement and the funny part, I don't think this was planned, but the funny part was you guys were dressed almost the same.
I know. I know.
So it was fantastic to
Yeah,
see.
it was lots of fun, and he had
Yeah.
and he's sort of launched this. Not launch. It's a product that was from before, but he's brought it to the market again. These high Gs.
Yes.
So that was kind of neat, and seeing sort of, just walking through a company that we both got raised in, and then be able to actually have a conversation. And Mauro Chiesa came on. Mauro, I've been friends with for a long time. And he doesn't pull any punches, and he really hit on what mines need to do differently to attract investors, and was very realistic about why. Like people are moving to the tech industry.
Yeah.
They're moving away from some of these heavy industries in their investment portfolios, and that's hurting mining.
Yeah.
And then he showed what do mines have to do to both cut costs and to also attract. So that was very cool.
Yeah.
What are a couple other that stood out for you just quickly on this list? I'll check off. So I want to quickly
We did.
cover.
Okay,
yeah.
we got it's like a whole list here of stuff. You know what? Corey Wright was actually a great interview too, because real estate is one of those topics that a lot of us, get so confused. I mean, it's not, and it's one of those topics that people go, I don't get it. I give up. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. So it was very nice. He was so informative.
Yeah.
I left like, wow, that's the process. That's what you need to do, or that's how it works.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times, like I said, you read or you look at, ads like on Facebook about real estate or this and that. And I'm left like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, or it seems really simple, so you get involved in something that you really shouldn't have been because you don't. It seems simple.
Yeah.
These people that there's nothing wrong with it. But when you see simplified versions, because a lot of people are trying to break down it to a simplistic version, and then they don't realize, so that basically the consumer doesn't realize how complex it actually is, and they get involved with something that's way out of their depth.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, like when Brad Kindle came on.
Again, another one. Yeah.
We've known Brad for a long time. We've done a little bit of work with him. And understanding the difference between commercial financing and I guess residential private financing.
Yeah.
The information that he started his company a couple years ago, Ashdown Capital, and I mean equipment financing, all the things that they do. I mean, to break it down. For one, you see the level of expertise he has, but also you see, okay, you need to actually understand this stuff before you dive in. Because even big company owners are making major mistakes because they just don't realize.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else?
You know what? Gianni Kovacevic. I can never say his last name.
Oh, you're messing me up.
Kovacevic? Kovacevic, I think is what it is.
I think so,
I
yeah.
hope. Gianni, I'm so sorry if I said it wrong. You know what? I really liked that interview for a few reasons. Mostly because we have the conversation all the time about, you drive a Prius and I drive a massive SUV. And so we have that conversation. And the difference is, and he said it himself, for a person like myself who likes going off-roading and doing the mountaintop and all that kind of stuff, a Prius or a Tesla, it just doesn't work for me.
Prius,
and nor would I.
Prius plug-in, to clarify. Prius Prime.
Exactly. Sorry. So, and he said it himself, like you just, for that type of person, they wouldn't even consider it. And I wouldn't. I mean, personally, perhaps for in the city someday I might, but I don't. I like to pick up and go and not have to worry that I need to charge my vehicle, especially when I go off, in the middle of nowhere for hours, for days.
Yeah.
So,
I like the, I like the what I said to you the other day, as soon as hybrids came out, I just thought it was just a fantastic idea. So I thought, okay, so I don't have to charge it. Now I do have a car that charges for a certain amount of time. But I like the mixture of both. It's hard because I don't go up into the mountains, even though I'm from the mountains. But anyway, I don't go up as much as I'd like because I don't have an SUV. But I like to go out. And so I like not having that restriction. If you're just living in the city, electric is
Exactly.
fine. A lot of people have them as second
Yeah.
cars, right? They'll have their Tesla, and then they'll have their. If you have the money
Yeah.
for like a nice Tesla, you have the money
Exactly,
for your
which
SUV.
is what he kind of talked about with I believe it's the new car to go.
Yeah, that's pretty
and,
cool.
I can't believe I forgot.
Yes, one company bought another company, and I can't remember what it is. but
Daimler, I believe it was.
Was it? What's it?
Daimler.
Daimler,
I think. I hope it. I hope
And
it is.
they,
Yeah, and they merged with like Car to Go, which is a fantastic idea because it's exactly that. Basically, I could have my Tesla in the city and just, order in a whatever massive SUV, whatever I'm looking for,
Whatever
a
you
Land
want.
Rover if that's what I want,
Yeah.
to go out, drive up to Whistler or wherever I want to go, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. I think
Yeah.
it's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we got. I was actually just watching that highlight yesterday. That interview we did, that was actually one of the latest episodes with Keith Matthew. He was talking about meeting the Pope and his representing his band to negotiate with Kinder Morgan. I mean, just heavy stuff. I mean, these are mainstream issues.
Yes.
That we didn't do a 2-minute clip on. We dug into the information, and it was, I got shivers watching a couple spots of those because it was powerful. And what struck me is at the end when he was talking about meeting the Pope, is that he said he's still a Catholic, but he's having to represent his people.
Yeah.
But he still has this faith
Yeah.
in this massive organization.
Yeah.
And it's just a powerful. If you want to see, just go to that episode
Yeah.
and then
Definitely
go to the
worth
end
watching, yeah.
and watch because it's in the last 10 minutes of that
Yeah.
episode. It's really. Greg Hellett from Otter Co-op. That was I Was Sick. So Rory hosted that with you.
Yeah, that's right.
Xylem came on. That was crazy.
I know. We had Whipware.
Whipware. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just drew a blank on his
Tom Pelangio.
Tom Pelangio, yeah.
That was a great episode too.
He's a good
that was
guy.
on CIM.
Yeah, that was a CIM episode.
Yeah.
Steel Box.
Yes.
Yeah.
Steel Box. That was great.
Peter Cron came on. He's still running for the Conservative Party.
Yeah. We had Energold, Fred Davidson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's another guy. Fred was a guy who he's a former accountant and teacher at UBC, I believe. And then he got this opportunity to start. I don't think he started with Energold, but anyway, he ended up being the CEO of Energold.
Yeah.
Really sharp guy. You can just tell he's very heads up. And he is in a competitive market, and he has navigated that company very, very well.
Yeah.
That was a cool. That was one of those interviews where there's just so much information.
Yes, a lot. Yeah. We also had SGB, which is a German company. Mr. Rudiger Weinhardt.
He was a cool.
He was fantastic.
His whole team.
His whole team. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah. Also at CIM.
Also at CIM, yeah. That's where we kind of met. Like, we met so many people, and that we kind of used that to launch.
I think some of them still have come on the show again. Well, actually, Brent Hilscher has come on the show a couple times. Yeah.
He's coming on next week as well.
Oh, look at that, 3.
Did I say about Tom Shapitka? He came on as well.
He did, yes, Tom Shapitka.
He's out of the Kootenays. Yeah, the MLA of the Kootenays. There was another German company that came on.
Yes, you're right. Oh, that was like that was part of an interview. It was
we didn't actually
on his own.
The show.
Yeah, it wasn't a podcast. It wasn't an episode.
Yeah.
It was just an interview
on
its own.
Because we did little interview spots as well.
Yeah.
But there was just so many people that came on, and to sort of wind the show down, is we didn't know how people would respond. But, for you, the audience, whoever's, if you stuck with us to the end of this episode, you've engaged and you've given us a reason to keep putting the shows out. That's why we're doing the shows.
Yeah,
because people are watching and engaging and talking. We've got the Crownsmen Podcast group on Facebook. We're launching them on YouTube. What are all the platforms?
Instagram. Okay, so we've got
podcasts.
Facebook, Instagram, and the podcast you can listen on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox.
Yeah.
So many. I can't even
across
remember the
all
list.
the platforms.
Yeah.
It's just
It's great.
so we want to thank you for listening and for watching and for sharing and commenting, and we hope to see more and more of it, because that's the sponsors essentially help us pay the bills for doing it.
But without guests,
without guests, there's no sponsors, there's no show, there's no information that we can give out. It's fantastic. So thank you for watching.
And actually, if there are any of your favorites, please let us know. What are your favorite episodes? And what are you guys hoping to see? Who should we go after? Who you would like to see on the show next? Yeah, definitely let us know. Yeah.
Can we have the cake now?
We can have the cake. Let's have cake.
What
I think they're off camera there.
So you're not even gonna. We have to get a couple candles on this cake.
We do.
I'll fill in space. What has to happen?
Well, if you can get the candles, they're actually just off camera here. So let's have some cake here. Actually, this morning was kind of it was quite interesting trying to get to the office. There was just a bunch of things happening. I missed. I missed I was trying to leave my house and the cake and and the balloons. Oh my God, the balloons was I was trying to walk down the street with the balloons.
You actually got number one, hey?
I did.
Yeah.
All right, we
covered everybody that was on the show. So
we did.
We actually, I'm waiting. We also have rolled out, because of the popularity of the podcast, we also are helping other people do their shows as well. We rolled out something called Copilot, which is where we get a group of professionals together that maybe aren't good fits for our show, but let's say a real estate group wanted to get together, and then we'll help produce it, market it. So that's a cool thing that we should watch for, and we should promote that earlier on the show so that people know that we're doing that.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love. We're not trying to just
be our own
help
voice.
Ourselves, but we're here to help everybody.
That's terrifying.
This is yeah. I'm just gonna set it down here before.
And the other one we rolled out was On-Site, and On-Site is that is us actually coming. So you could let's say you were a big company, you're going to one of these big trade shows, you want something to attract somebody, you want to get your partners some exposure. Like Bombardier, right? They had 3 partnerships with that from that clip we saw. You can then. What you can do is get us to come on. We'll produce it under your brand. So like a little 6-part series under your brand. And it's pretty affordable actually, because we've done it enough that we can kind of deliver it at a good value.
Yeah, but definitely. I mean, there's more information on our website, so please go there, or just email us.
Just email us, ask us. We'll send you lots of information.
Awesome.
So, did these make sounds?
No, I was like.
Oh, you didn't get this.
We didn't get the sounds.
That's terrifying.
It's horrible.
I get scared.
I should have. Yes, I was told Jared gets scared. If anything. Oh my God! Look at that. It doesn't work.
No, you gotta.
Oh, it does work.
You gotta get them all.
You know what? Oh my goodness, Rory.
I did that. Yeah, where's Rory?
Where's Rory?
Rory will probably do them all at one time.
Oh my!
Nice.
There we go.
I kind of think you hit that one.
I probably did. Well, no, there you go. Happy anniversary to the Crownsmen Podcast. It's a shame Rory was not able to be here with us, because he is also part of the Crownsmen Podcast, although he's never seen on camera. I think he's only been seen a couple times.
But we'll get him on more.
Yeah.
I want to say one last thing. Actually, 2 last things. Peter Finn had us on. He had me on for an interview on full production. Yes. That was very cool. He's got a show out of Australia, so it's nice that we're now starting to connect with some of these other people that are doing the shows. So please go check that show out, because, I mean, again, we want more shows. We want more productions out there. So Full Production is the name of the podcast with Peter Finn. And then lastly, Gowdy, I'm going to embarrass you. We started off the show. We had a crew. We did all this stuff, and then basically you figured out how to do it. So you're running the cameras, the lighting, the sound. Then you go and edit it and produce it. And so it's very cool. What it does allow us to keep, the budget better, so sponsors can do it. Us as a company can continue to do the show, and we can pump out more content.
Yeah.
So it's very cool, the work you've done. Thanks for co-hosting and helping with all this stuff. I mean, I basically put together notes at the beginning, at the end, and then you're doing all this work in between. So thank you for that work.
You're very welcome.
Very much appreciate it. On behalf of Rory as well. Thank you for watching, everybody. We will see you next week.
Friday.
Next Friday.
Yay.
Okay, have a good day.